Dear friends, you're in the Military with Summary channel, and in this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the United States of America. We received lots of important statements made by the President of the United States of America after the end of the Venezuelan limited military operation. Trump opened the conference. Operation Midnight Hammer was perfect. Donald Trump called the US actions in Venezuela an extraordinary military operation. There hasn't been an operation like this since World War II. We have restored justice. The goal of the US operation in Venezuela was to capture Maduro. Maduro and his wife will face American justice. Trump accused Maduro and his wife of narco-terrorism. We have cuts off 97% of the drugs coming into our country. If you saw what I saw last night, you would be impressed. I don't think you'll see it. We will govern Venezuela. The United States intends to govern Venezuela until it can carry out a safe, orderly, and rational transition of power. Trump stated that during the operation to capture Maduro, all of Venezuela's military capabilities were disabled. The American leader compared the operation in the Caracas to the strike on Soleimani, calling it one of the most impressive in U.S. history. We can carry out a second wave of attacks. It will be larger, and we are ready. However, right now that probably won't be necessary. The first attack was successful. Maduro's power is over. He is no longer president. A decision will soon be made whether the ship carrying Maduro will head to New York, Miami, or Florida. We will make the people of Venezuela rich, independent, and secure. Trump, we have absolute evidence of Maduro's guilt, which will be presented to the court. But this is not the end of the situation in Venezuela, and the thing that the president, or already a former president of Venezuela, was captured doesn't mean that the situation with Venezuela was over and stabilized with the United States of America. During the previous 12 hours also we received lots of photos of videos of Maduro when he was brought to New York, and on Monday he is going to face a court where most likely he first decisions will be made regarding his destiny. At the same time, we received lots of very interesting statements made by Trump regarding China and the Russian Federation. I have a very good relations with Xi, and there is not going to be a problem. They're going to get oil. We're going to allow people to have oil. This is a very important statement. I'm not thrilled with Russia, with Putin. We didn't talk to Putin about Maduro. I'm not afraid of Putin. I'm not thrilled with him. That was also stated by the President of the United States of America. Once again, despite the fact that already a former President Maduro was captured or arrested, the state of Venezuela hasn't collapsed. The state of Venezuela hasn't collapsed, and this is an important thing. According to information we have, according to media, the Vice President Rodriguez is going to be in charge of Venezuela for the next months until elections take place on the territory of the state. But at the same time, the Vice President Rodriguez has already made a lot of important statements. She said that Venezuela will never be a colony of any empire. Another important statement: we must stand up in defense of our homeland. All sectors of Venezuelan society must be mobilized to safeguard Venezuela's independence. Another important: we demand immediate proof of life that President Nicolas Maduro and First Lady are alive. And she has convened a National Defense Council meeting discussing how to proceed and coordinate. So Maduro had problems with law in the United States of America, with the United States of America itself, so that is why he was arrested. But when talking about Rodriguez, about the vice president, about the current leader of Venezuela, most likely she doesn't have problems with law, which means that basically the United States of America doesn't have a legal right to arrest her as well. So this is a very important. And now she will decide how to hold elections on the territory of Venezuela. And the most important thing is who controls her right now, who controls the guard of her right now, who is her bodyguards. Because you know that it's the same situation as with Zelensky. He is independent probably, but obviously in his this inner circle, we might find some agents or security from some Western countries, and sometimes, maybe very often, they decide what to do next. So that is why we can see the same situation with the vice president of Venezuela. Who controls her? This is the most important question, and according to her first statements and first phone calls, it seems that she is not under the control of the United States of America. It seems that she has some connections with the Russian Federation, because right after the everything happened with Venezuela, she had a lot of phone calls with the Russia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, and for example, Russia stated that Russia will continue to support Venezuela's policy aimed at protecting the country's national interest and sovereignty. During his telephone conversation with Venezuelan Executive Vice President Rodriguez, the party spoke in favor of preventing further escalation and finding a way out of the situation through dialogue. So this is a very important thing: who controls the vice president of Venezuela and the current leader of Venezuela, because based on this situation we will understand who is going to become the next president of Venezuela. And despite the fact that the United States of America captured Maduro, it doesn't mean that the next president will play a game in the US favor. The situation could be completely different and completely opposite to everything that was stated by the president of the United States of America. Of course, Trump and the United States of America will try to do everything they can to run Venezuela until elections, and they will do this, but not today. And starting from tomorrow, we will get more and more updates about the situation in this sphere.
Champions League endelig tilbage.
Vi skal spille Champions League.
Det går bra! Det bliver vildere.
Now let's move to Ukraine and let's discuss the situation along the line of combat contact. During the previous 12 hours, the Russians improved their positions. Let's discuss these improvements in details. And first, let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction. According to information we have, according to neutral mappers, the Russians began advancing further in the western direction from the settlement of Gulay-Polye. Now the Russians are advancing in the direction of several settlements. The Russians are trying to check the Ukrainian capabilities around the settlement of Zelene. The Russians are improving their positions in the direction of the settlements of Stara Ukrainka and Sveta-Petrivka. First of all, we're talking about the sabotage and reconnaissance groups, and the Russians began advancing in the direction of Zaliznychne first. And another important thing is that Russians began advancing from the south in the direction of the settlement of Zaliznychne through these fields along railways. So the Russians began advancing, started a new offensive operation, as of now just with the sabotage and reconnaissance groups, but after the sabotage and reconnaissance group, the Russians will start moving with the regular army. In this video we can see how Russians discovered another infantry fighting vehicle of the armored forces to Ukraine and some truck with supply and support that were destroyed in the area of the settlement of Stara Ukrainka. So the Russians continue offensive operation, and now the Russians are aimed to get as close as possible to the city of Orekhov from the northeast. As for the Dobropolye direction, we have the same story. According to different sources, the Russians began a major or a full-scale offensive operation with the purpose to break through Ukrainian defense as soon as possible and to enter the settlements of Belitska, Novoshakhova, Novodonbass, Dobropolye, Shevchenka, Grishina, and to approach and to shorten the distance to Sergeyevka to establish complete control over Novopodgorodny. During the previous days, the Russians couldn't do this due to very bad weather, but now the weather is getting better and better from day to day, and which allows the Russians to begin moving further in the northwestern direction. As of now, according to this map and according to different sources, we haven't received anything that can allow us to make additional changes on the ground. We have just reports that the Russians began advancing and that the Russians managed to get very deep inside of the Ukrainian defense due to huge gap in manpower from Ukrainian side. As for the Slavian's direction, probably this is one of the areas where we received some changes. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. According to different sources, during the previous 48 hours in 2026, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. Russians managed to capture fields, trenches, fortifications, and true lines between the villages of Bandarna and Zaliznychne. We're talking about this territory. This information, as you can see, was provided by different pro-Russian sources. Furthermore, the Russians to improve their positions around the settlements of Sviatopokrovska towards the village by the name of Riznikovka. So a few more trenches, few more true lines were captured by Russians according to a neutral mapper. So this is the situation in this area. Very slowly but step by step the Russians are moving further in the western direction. As for the Liman direction, the Russians are not changing its tactics. They are completely focused on the Ukraine's logistic. In this video, we can see how another vehicle of the armored forces of Ukraine was trying probably to get to the city of Liman, but was destroyed with FPV drone attack. So the story is not changing in this direction. The Russians are trying to exhaust Ukrainians before beginning their major assault on the city of Liman. As for the city of Kupiansk, during the previous 24 hours and night, we haven't received anything that can allow us to change the map. The weather is too bad for both the Russians and the Ukrainians to make any active actions along the line of combat contact. As for the city of Volchansk, during the previous 12 hours, we received some changes. So these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the 3rd of January and this is the beginning of the 4th of January. The Russians, according to information we have, according to a neutral mapper, managed to improve their positions along the Miru Street towards the central part of the settlement of Ovchansky Hutory. This information was confirmed by neutral mappers and was first of all provided by the group of forces north. Furthermore, the Russians managed to shorten the distance to the village of Gravska, which is located along the river of Seversky Donets, which means that in coming days, or maybe today, the Russians will start an assault operation on the settlement itself with the purpose to establish complete control over the territory and then to continue advancing further in the southern direction towards the settlements of Semyonovka, Losovka and Chisterevka.
Savner I noget sjovt at samles om? Slip kreativiteten løs og tegn, byg, leg.
As for the Sumy direction, the Russians are intensifying their assault operation on the territory of the settlement of Raiska. The Ukrainians managed to introduce additional forces in this area with the purpose to stabilize the situation and not to allow the Russians to take the settlement under complete control. The Russians see the movements of Ukrainian forces in this area, so that is why during the previous 24 hours the Russians were focused to destroy as many as possible temporary deployment points of the armored forces of Ukraine in this area. A lots of explosions and a lots of attacks were recorded. The Russians were bombing and attacking the settlement of Ryasna with aviation, which means that in coming days the Russians will launch drones, FPV drones, to secure the village, the settlement, and then a ground operation will begin. So this is the situation in Ukraine. The Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous 12 hours, we also received lots of statements from Ukrainian sides. According to, for example, Arachmia, the Ukrainian authorities want a 90-day ceasefire, not just to hold a referendum on the peace agreement, but a 3-month ceasefire before it. Furthermore, the Ukrainians are going to have a referendum and the president elections at the same day. At the same time, we have a very important statement. According to Ukrainian authorities, during this referendum, the Ukrainians will be asked just a simple question: do you support the peace agreement or not? But this is the most important situation because there are several peace agreements. For example, there is a 20-point plan that was prepared by Zelensky and the European allies, which will never be accepted from the Russian side. And even if you ask Ukrainians about this plan, and if Ukrainians agree to accept this plan, it doesn't mean that Russians will agree with this. So that is why we see that Ukraine is trying to have some political process through Ukraine, but this political process don't correspond with the demands of the Russian side. Once again, the 20-point plan proposed by Zelensky, which most likely will be used for the possible referendum, is not something that Russia wants or will accept. So that is why we believe that as of now, Ukraine is trying to get some time, to win some time, to survive during this winter period of time, and then to continue everything that we saw in 2024, 2025, and so on. Another important statement was made, of course, on China. In China, China condemns the use of force against Venezuela as a violation of international law and sovereignty. So we see that most likely China and Russia will play additional role in the Venezuela. Most likely China and Russia have some control over the vice president of Venezuela, which means that the situation in this country hasn't finished yet. And that's it for the short video. Military with Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.